Hi, and welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Christopher Bousquet is a client executive for the Tribe of Litmus 7 and a 20-year veteran of the retail and e-commerce space. He's worked on both sides of the table, agency, organizations like eFashion Solutions, Kate Spade Company, Tapestry, and RafterOne. Over the years, Chris has built and led teams, reshaped processes, and helped some of the biggest retail brands navigate digital transformation. He holds a master's in interactive communication from Quinnipiac University and a bachelor's in broadcast communication from Barry University. When not working, you'll probably find Chris on the mat. He's been training jiu-jitsu for over a decade with Subforce Jiu-Jitsu and training grounds in New Jersey. But above all, his proudest and longest running role is being a dad for nearly 16 years. Please welcome Christopher Bousquet. Welcome, Chris, to Still Evolving, and we are very excited to have this conversation, share back on your journey, your lessons learned, and I'm sure plenty of takeaways for our audience. So without further ado, let's jump in. If you could please share with our audience a bit of your journey and maybe the motivations kind of that have fueled you along the way.
Ooh, okay. I'll try to be as brief as I can, right? Because I know this is a quick hit, like 20-minute episode, and I could probably do like 2 hours on this, no problem. I've been 2 decades in the digital space, specifically retail and e-commerce. As a young upstart, I started in mixed media editing, a broadcast student, a kid running around with, the big shoulder mounted camera, trying to get, a sound on tape man on the street stuff, and, really excited about telling stories and engaging with folks and kind of being curious about people and really having a knack to put my hands on editing and get further into what was becoming digital technology today, right? Eventually I made the pivot into what was at the time called new media. New media is now old media, which makes me feel terrible, but I did make that pivot and went full digital. And I proudly called myself a developer, arguably, because I got into Adobe Flash at the time and really started getting into web development and cut my teeth in that space, coming up on the front end presentation layer of things. Doing headless before headless was a trend and composable became a thing, right? It really just kind of growth there as far as thought leadership goes, getting really curious about strategy, passionate about how the market was evolving, new technologies coming out. Eventually, I left the developer role behind and touched so many more areas across management and projects and oversight to environments, managed services development, and was fortunate enough to kind of bounce between agency side and retailer side. So uniquely, I've sat on both sides of that table when they go to talk to each other. So lovingly, I'll refer to myself now as a mediator between the divorced couple, right? Because you've got the agency wants to do one thing and the client wants to do another thing, and they both kind of have their personalities. And I just sit in the middle and try to translate what the other is saying.
What a task before you.
And
What has fueled your journey along the way? I mean, certainly it sounds like there's an element that the curiosity really got you there into the emerging technologies. And then certainly as the developer role shifted to now you're in leadership and really kind of helping to negotiate and communicate between two very critical partners. What has kept you going? What has fueled you along the way?
sure, a couple themes that have run the gamut is one, I really love building teams. I love building function, right? And as I was looking back over my career, because my daughter actually had a school assignment where she texted me and she's like, Dad, how many jobs have you had? And I'm like, why do you need to know my resume? And she's like, it's for a career finance course that she's taking in high school. And she's like, the teacher asked us to ask our parents how many jobs they've had. And I started running the Rolodex back in my head. And I was like, oh my God, I've had a lot. But what I did notice is that I was usually like first or second hire to a lot of organizations. And I really kind of found my niche and excitement in being first or second on because you get to set the process, set the practice, build the team, right? Have input, even when you might feel like you're lower on the totem pole in terms of organization, but because you're like the only other person in that room, you become sounding board for a lot of leadership conversations, which kind of gives you the build of that experience to then leverage later on in life. So that was one aspect. The other aspect that drives me is I'm very curious in the question behind the question, right? Which is a deeper way of saying, well, what's the why? A lot of folks will come to the table and say, I need this, or they'll ask for that. But that's not usually the right question or the actual question, right? And then as you start to unpack and talk about the need, you actually find maybe a layer or two down what they're actually trying to figure out. And to
Yeah.
me, that was always kind of like that's always been like a fun riddle to kind of understand. Well, I hear your question, but what's the context behind it? How did you come to this question? What do you think the actual need is? And can we talk this through, right? I wish my wife could hear me right now because she loves talking things through, and it like in family life, I'm like, I am so done. But
I'm done
professionally,
talking things through.
I definitely use that.
I love that. It reminds me early on in my graduate training, I had a supervisor who would, come back at us and challenge us and say, ask the question you want the answer to, first off, because it is interesting in how we're socialized. Oftentimes we're trying to craft in what we may think the person would want to hear. And sometimes it just, forget efficiency. That's not there. But also, it's not going to deliver the information that you really are looking for. So I appreciate the meta there, right? It's considering like what's behind it. It does take energy. I can appreciate maybe at home you're done, you're tired, but it also takes, a willingness to listen to understand. And I think oftentimes we're in a mode of listening to respond, like in sales, being able to show the solution or the value. Um, and perhaps in strategy, just providing another way, a perspective, an idea. And so being able to listen to understand it, that also not just takes energy, but skill. So I
100%.
appreciate that.
I think there's a curiosity that you have to have that drives your listening, right? Because otherwise, I do feel, and I'm agreeing with you that it feels like people are waiting to talk, right? They're just waiting their turn. They've already got an idea locked in their head what the response is going to be, and they're just waiting for the gap in conversation to throw that out there. I think what becomes critical, and maybe it's something that's gained with experience, is that having curiosity is the pitch, right? It is the way forward with someone because a lot of the time when you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, build rapport, build trust, build those things, right? That ultimately drive business, they just want to feel heard. And when you can do a simple thing, which is listen to what actually actively listen to what they're saying, and then take a moment to say, let me make sure I heard you right. And then spit it back and give them an opportunity to change or augment how you're processing or how you've absorbed what they just said. I feel like everyone comes away from that conversation now feeling like, nah, the other person got it. They got it. They get where I'm coming from. They get what I'm after. And I feel like that was a good use of my time.
I love it. And such a helpful reminder for us in all of our roles and relationships, right? Work, personal, the
Absolutely.
power of that listening. I'm curious, like how in today's many of us in our work climates, the industry that we're in, or just like I said, the climate in general, it feels very fast paced. It can feel very volatile.
Hmm.
Some of our listeners are working in roles where it feels more crisis oriented, cybersecurity, trying to like ward off and mitigate threats there, or respond to a critical incident. In those times that feel either incredibly time urgent or, there's some other press on you as a leader, what helps you engage that active listening? Because I would say a counter to that would be like, yeah, but we got to get shit done. We got to get this going. I don't have time. I just need a solution. What helps you as a leader in those what could be considered more pressurous moments still use that valuable tool?
So just to help the audience understand where I'm going to answer this from, I will give a tidbit of experience here. When I spent my time over at Spade Company and Tapestry, I was in operations and leading our support engineers before site reliability was a term, and absolutely was either on and driving or participating in the what we called war room calls at like 2 in the morning if something went bump in the night. And if a site did go down, and to the degree of a $250,000 to $500,000 loss every 30 minutes or an hour that we were down based on which site went down. So
Wow.
understanding high pressure, I get it. The thing that I've come out of those experiences with is that, and maybe some of my friends in the project management space can attest to this as well, is doing something right the first time is faster than doing it fast, getting it wrong, and having to redo it.
Hmm.
And it also smooths out expectations and relationships because you took the extra breath or the extra beat to double check or triple check, right? There's always that anecdote of measure twice, cut once, and we
Yeah,
lovingly
I was
said,
just
no, you
thinking of
better
that.
measure 4 times, right? Especially when you're looking for your root cause to the emergency and trying to align response and trying to figure out how it doesn't happen again. Everyone is moving quickly, but you've got to be the calm in that storm, right? And unfortunately, topically, we've got a record-breaking storm that's in the Atlantic right now. And when you look at the map of that, the closer to center you get, the closer to that, to the middle of that storm you get, the crazier it is, the more chaos that's happening. But in the middle of that storm, the very center of it is calm. And when leaders are in those moments, they've got to be the eye of the storm. They have to be the calm as the crazy is happening around them. And that measured voice is what I think keeps the effort moving quickly, but keeps you on track.
Love that metaphor. What helps you in the middle of the storm stay calm? Like, do you have a go-to recipe? When it's flying around you, like a cup, maybe one or two things that you kind of double down on, knowing that you have to have that composed presence as a leader?
Yeah. The answer is going to be super simple, and it's something I try to impress upon my kids and even, folks that are just like graduating and coming into their careers for the first time. I feel like a lot of folks want to just jump in and be an expert automatically, right? Like they just want to be viewed as such. We've got to understand that it's okay to not know anything and to be a blank slate and to build experience, because honestly, what is going to help that individual be the calm in the storm later on is the build of their experience in other tumultuous times. Right. And it doesn't have to be specifically in that field. It just needs to be in experiences that caused anxiety and then help that individual control and harness the energy that comes from anxiety into something productive. And I think that sure, there's professional moments where you can gain that, or I can share that personally. I've been doing jujitsu for almost 13 years now, right?
Yeah.
Privileged to benefit from the experience of those who have taught me. But I often say I'm usually not frazzled in a work conversation, because as bad as that can be, it's not as bad as somebody on my back with a rear naked choke almost sinked in and I'm trying to struggle out of it, right? It's relativity. How bad is the situation I'm in compared to what I've experienced? And just showing how disconnected you could think the sport, hobby, or passion of jujitsu is compared to what puts food on the table, right? My normal 9 to 5, but the skills that are learned are communicable, right? So really, it's pulling from your experience to understand that you've faced adversity, you've overcome adversity, and just reminding yourself of that as you go into the next occasion.
Yeah. You are prepared, right? Even if you're just starting out, this is your whole journey, because that's why I love and thank you for sharing also on your jujitsu experience, is that I really love these conversations and opening like, what's your journey? Yeah, part of that journey, one component may be what you do to keep the lights on or put the food on the table. But there's so much more. And I love that helpful reminder that there are many skills in life that are very transferable depending. And, my language, we use the performance domain. There's the sport performance domain, like you were talking about in martial arts, but there's also then perhaps a professional domain. And there's some similarities and crossover skills that are incredibly valuable. When we talk about composure, I hear you referencing really the management of, like you use the word anxiety, but the management of the energy that is invoked in those moments from the human system. But I think also when we can consider the impact of energy like long term, like this is a grind, right? Whether our professional journey is a grind, parenting, you mentioned your children. I am a mother of I have now older teenagers, so you can see connections starting. I can affirm that there is light from those moments where you're wondering, I'm not really sure, but one of us may not survive this. But when we think about our journeys, it's more than a marathon. And so our energy can wax and wane. What helps you recover to kind of continue on? May have been after a challenge, but sometimes it's just I need to get to Saturday and I need to give me 1 hour more of sleep or something like that. But what helps you manage the energy over time?
Sure. So I do think jujitsu, it just on that one aspect alone has been an amazing way of getting myself into it's church, right? And
Hmm.
I'm going to use that a little loosely, right? Because I know that can be personal and meaningful in a variety of aspects. But to me, it is, especially since I do open mats on a Sunday morning in addition to my classes, it is a place where I can go, I can step onto that mat, and everything else exists outside, and it all stays outside. And usually in my interviews, when I'm evaluating new team members that might join, I ask them, what are you doing outside of work to avoid your burnout in order to find and recenter yourself to recharge, so to speak? And for folks, that could be spending, an afternoon on a lake fishing. It could be out shopping at a Jersey mall, right? Like, everyone's got different passions and things that kind of are it for them. And I really do recommend everyone kind of exploring introspectively to figure out what is that thing for them, right? Whether it is being mom or dad and being at the kids' games on the weekends and completely disconnecting from that 9 to 5 effort. But it has to be something, right? You can't, I don't think that one can survive just on work alone on that grind because, and as developers and engineers will tell you, the burnout's real, especially when you're on
Yeah.
a project, especially when you're burning hot at 70 to 80 hours a week, you're up till 4 in the morning trying to hit a deadline. That burnout for folks who are not in the field, but travel a bit. If you've done 4 days in Vegas, it feels like that. Now imagine that every couple weeks hitting you because you're just on that grind, right? There has to be something that disconnects that you can put it all away and you can come back to it.
Right. I love it. I set a 2-night maximum for Vegas intentionally, but
The older you get, the less you got to take a night off, I think, with every decade.
yes, yes, I have reduced the travel time in Vegas.
But
But
you
your point
increase the
is
recovery time when you get back.
yes. No, but your point is so well made. I mean, the intensity of so much of the load, right? We use that in the world of high performance to really capture all that is impacting our human system, that our human system is having to then respond to. It could be cognitive load, it could be relational load, it could be physical load. And depending on our roles, it ebbs and flows, right? What we're having to respond to. So I very much appreciate one, the actions of reflection, like consider and explore and be curious outside of work of something that's really going to help feel meaningful, purposeful, recharging, rejuvenating. And sometimes it is go play. Like
Yeah,
really, like
you
there's
really do.
power in like that go play. But I also love also the you finding jujitsu. I can't find my words today. And how that really sounds to be so much more than like a physical outlet, right? It holds much more for you. So thank you for that one. I could kick this all day. We do try to be that quick hit podcast that people can kind of tap on their commutes or while they're on the treadmill. But we want to leave the audience, even though I could kind of kick this all day, we like leaving the audience that immediate and actionable strategy, something that they can kind of take with them and give a shot. So what's one thing that you employ in your daily routine that really has helped you either bounce back from adversity or sustain being the leader, perhaps maybe the other roles in your life, father, partner, that is so meaningful? What helps you every day?
Sure. I think it's reminding myself that every experience is valuable, good or bad, right?
Hmm.
But there's another anecdote out there, and I think it comes from Asian culture, where it's the what's good or bad, right? And they talk about the farmer who's the horse, it kind of goes through a series of events, and he's constantly saying, well, what's good or bad? And I think as I've gone through life in general, professional life, personal life, there's just like everybody else, there's ups and downs. And to the extremes, like really bad moments, really great moments. And especially in the really bad moments, I think it's worth reminding yourself that there's a value to the experience that you've gone through. Even if you don't see what it is for yourself, there's a value to someone else because you've gone through it, that it helps you build your relationship with others because you can reach back to that as a way to help them through it as they're going through it. And I find when it comes to things like mentorship, and I've used it professionally, I've used it in jujitsu, and I use it in my parenting, which is the diversity of experiences that I've had, good or bad. Every one of them is useful in helping to light that way for the up and comer who's coming in behind me. And then hopefully they can build off that experience to be better than I was. I feel like when I remind myself of that, it refocuses me on the North Star of where I'm going and why I do what I do.
Christopher, thank you. You know, so often we talk about there's something to be learned in every experience we go through, right? Like there is still value there despite the pain it may cause or the disappointment or the frustration, kind of the negative reactions. Admittedly, though, this is probably one of the first in the conversation where we talk about even if we can't find a lesson learned for ourselves, the value that comes from that experience and being able to then connect and lift one on one, perhaps maybe through parenting, the next generation, or even in our professional journeys, those around us. It helps empower that or fuel that empathy. That shared experience is so powerful if you're mentoring or if you're leading your team. So great point. I love it. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. Thank you.
Very much appreciate the talk and hope the conversation continues. Thank you, Christopher.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.